Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to kick off today's webinar. I'm John Warwick. I'm a partner with JM Search, and I lead our media and telecom practice. I'm also a member of the C2HR Board of Directors, and I hope everyone is staying healthy and safe during these times. I want to thank you all for participating in today's webinar, High Tech, High Touch Virtual Recruiting. And today is the first in a return to work series of webinars that C2HR is hosting. And I encourage you to check out the upcoming topics at c2hr.org. I also want to invite you to check out another feature on that website, the Knowledge Center. It's a curated collection of timely articles and resources on more than 24 topics. We have more than 75 articles in the COVID-19 sections that you'll likely find highly valuable. And before we announce today's speakers, I want to acknowledge our C2HR champion sponsors who made this webinar possible. So many thanks to the Cable Center and Charter Communications for their ongoing support of C2HR and our programs. Today we have three experts who will share their insights on the very timely topic of virtual recruiting. Jen Tracy has got a great reputation in the industry. Jen is from Charter Communications. Mike Hootie from Modern Hire, and Ali Khan Rematullah. And what I would ask is that if you have questions along the way, and we hope you do, please enter them into the chat. And they'll be addressed. We'll save some time for at the end and answer everyone's questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jen to kick off the discussion.
Thanks so much. So I really appreciate everyone joining this afternoon to talk about our virtual recruiting. We are going to walk you through what I would say has been a 3-year labor of love in getting us to a virtualized recruiting process. And so while none of us was excited to deal with COVID-19, it certainly was an easier transition for us as an organization to make that move simply because we already had these virtual tools in place. And so what we're hoping to do today is make sure we can share with you a little bit of our best practices and certainly 2 of my vendor partners that have been instrumental in making that change. And so we'll talk a little bit about Altru, and you'll hear from Ali Khan in just a minute, but we'll talk about how we embed that throughout the ecosystem that we have with social media, within our career site and our job descriptions. And then on Modern Hire, we actually started a partnership, which at the time would have been Shaker, which merged with our video recruiting platform. And so we now have Modern Hire for both our virtual job tryout as well as some of our other featured tools. And we'll also share a little bit about what's next, because I always have this comment that we're never done. We're never done evolving our ecosystem. We're never done trying to figure out what's the next way to move. So we'll share a little bit of that as well. So we'll keep moving along. And so one of the things I wanted to highlight about right now is this is as of 4/24 and the job postings on Indeed. And the yellow line you're seeing on the screen is the postings for 2020. And this is not a big surprise to any of us. Fortunately for many of us in the industry, we're not facing the significant amount of layoffs and furloughs that are happening in other industries like hospitality and travel. But certainly you can see this data starting to come to fruition. And we'll talk a little bit about what this marketplace means, but if we can move to the next slide. You know, this morning we announced that we have 30 million filed for unemployment as of this morning. Yesterday, they reported that the U.S. economy shrank by 4.8%. And what's important about this is if you look at these 2 graphs, the first one depicts unemployment and shows you from 2008 to 2010 how that recession played out in a graph, and that at the lowest point, the total amount of unemployment claims was 665,000. So you compare that to the 30 million, and it's just staggering. And so we don't quite have examples of the spike on the unemployment side because they usually run a couple of weeks and months behind. But on the far right, we do have a graph that's tracking the people that have been less than 5 weeks on unemployment, and you're starting to see that spike hit in the data that we have. So with that, you know, we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about how virtual recruiting really applies no matter what the marketplace brings. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the next slide and and we'll have Mike talk a little bit about this. Mike's muted. If we could have Colleen, if you could unmute him, that would be fabulous.
All right, thank you.
There we go.
I was trying to type that in the comments. Yeah, so Jen's previous 2 slides leads perfectly into this in that we have a lot of outcomes that we're trying to achieve with the recruitment process, but we group them into 4 broad categories. First, efficiency. We want to move candidates through the process, get them from point A to point B, kind of thinking about your time to fill metrics. Second, effectiveness. At the same time, we want to quality of hire. We want people that are going to perform well, they're going to stay with us. Third, we want a diversity of hires. So we want a diverse candidate pool, which turns into diverse hires. And then finally, candidate experience. We want to create a connection, an emotional connection with our candidates as they come through our process. All of these things are important, but how we index on them changes a little bit depending on labor market. So in an environment where we have candidate scarcity, which is where we've all been for the past decade plus, record low unemployment, where we have lots of jobs and few candidates for those jobs, we really index on efficiency. We want to move candidates through the process quickly, grab the best ones we can right away, and we don't want to upset them so they leave our career site. And at the same time, that candidate experience, really wanting to create a connection. Kind of candidate is king in that environment, this environment that we've been in for quite a while. We've almost overnight moved to where we have candidate abundance, and Jen's slides really tee that up well. We have fewer jobs, as evidenced by that Indeed graphic, and all of the unemployment. We have many candidates vying for very few jobs. All 4 factors are still important, so we don't want to go away from efficiency or go away from candidate experience. We've come a long way in those regards, but we start to now index on, we have these huge candidate pools and we have to find the right individuals. We have lots of candidates to choose from, and so we really want to index on that quality of hire. And we'll talk about, and that kind of sets the stage for a lot of these tools that we're going to walk through here today, this afternoon. So why virtual recruiting? And this is interesting. This actually comes from a survey that we did before COVID-19, but in looking at it, it's become even more true in the environment we're in now. And this looks at why virtual recruiting, both on the left side from the recruiter perspective, and then on the right side from the candidate perspective. So from a recruiter perspective, recruiters are saying they're overwhelmed. Their jobs are much harder. 2/3 saying their jobs are harder than just 5 years ago. They don't have technology and the tools they need to get their jobs done. 55% say their apply process isn't fully mobile enabled yet, and just claiming that they don't have enough hours in the day. They're constantly being pushed to do more with less. So that's the recruiter side of the equation. If you flip over to the right side, to the candidate, candidates view the interview process is really important. 82% say that process influences whether they choose to work at your organization or not, and 1/3 of them exit because of a poor connection with your organization or with your recruiters. Candidates want an experience that's kind of consumer grade, and looking at Gen Zers, which is a big part of our candidate pool. They don't talk on their phones. They text, and they want to be engaged through text, and all of our candidates, or most of our candidates, have technology at their fingertips. They're searching for jobs on their phones, and 78% say that they would apply using mobile. And we need to get them through. Still need to get them through quickly. Candidates rank a fast process as their #1 criteria, and a big portion of them leave our process because they feel like their time is getting disrespected. So this is all kind of setting up why these tools, why virtual recruiting impacts both recruiters and candidates, solves some of these issues. And then, as we've come into this environment with COVID-19, and this is just a powerful slide that we have from our data to show how recruiting, it was moving along towards virtual, but it has jumped in both feet now. This is our interview volume. And what this shows is in the past year, and it just shows how it ebbs and flows from day to day. There's certain days in the week where we see more interviews done early in the week, not as much on the weekend. So that's what the raises and falls are throughout. But then you see come into March, we had 4x the volume in interviews, then 6x, and just recently we did a record amount of interviews, and we're at 10 times the number of interviews, technology-enabled interviews that we were doing pre-COVID-19.
Awesome. So hey everybody, I'm Ollie Khan. I'm the CEO and founder at Altru. If you guys aren't aware, Altru is focused on talent attraction and employee communication through authentic video. So we effectively have a software solution that allows companies like Spectrum to source video content from their employees. And then we give them the tools on the back end to edit, brand, and approve content, and ultimately distribute it to career sites, job descriptions, email and CRM, as well as social media. So today we want to just to kind of walk you guys through what Spectrum is doing specifically, especially in these times, to ensure that they can humanize their employer brand in the virtual environment for candidates. And on kind of a high level here, really what we've seen with regards to why this is important and why it's important today, I think the first and the most compelling argument that we've seen is that, look, video is not just more popular in our space today, it's now the dominant form of media in how we produce, consume, and share our knowledge, right? Cisco tells us that video is going to be 84% of all the internet here in 2020. So speaking back to some of the comments earlier on how candidates are consuming and engaging with brands, it's primarily driven through video, right? Secondly, when you want your candidates to learn more about your company's value proposition and why they should be considering it, what we've seen is that, look, people are spending upwards of 260% more time on pages that have video versus pages that only have text, right? And then I think the third form is really when we took this approach to the market, we saw that there was video that was being created, but it was primarily being created in a professional capacity. And I think what we found from a candidate perspective is, look, candidates want to interact with the employees, right? The people that they're going to be working with, the people that they're going to be working for, and not necessarily a corporate comms related professional video. I think there's a time and a place for both, but from a candidate perspective, they really wanted authentic content on one end. And from a company standpoint, companies really wanted a way to ensure that it fit within their brand strategy. So that's really what we try to work on with Spectrum, is understanding what type of content we'd like to deliver at different elements of the candidate experience. The other aspect of this is, we know that it's important to communicate and attract candidates, but what Spectrum has done that's a really unique approach is actually connecting with them in different ways at different stages of the journey, right? So what we've done is we've taken what was once a one-way funnel, and we've turned that into a continuous loop of engagement. And so what I mean by that is, we know that we have to raise awareness about our company at the top of the funnel, right? We know that we have to convert candidates at the job description, but in the middle of our interview process, can the candidates get video interview advice from specific employees to really increase the capacity and the quality of the candidate itself, right? When I'm onboarding at the company, can I get welcome videos from my team members? That way I'm able to meet them, especially in this increasingly remote world that we live in. How can I build around the culture and really establish a foundation within the company? And what that's helpful for is that when your candidates now have become employees for 18 to 24 months down the road, it is much easier and a much natural progression for them to now become advocates, right? And share the knowledge back to new candidates or new employees. So that's where we kind of think about taking what was once a one-way funnel and transitioning that into a continuous loop of engagement. And with that, what we can do is we can kind of show some examples of what Spectrum is doing specifically at different stages of the candidate experience. And so the first element is we'll actually create videos to then distribute to social media. So LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And this is a quick video that will play very quickly, and then even Jen can share her thoughts on why this video was compelling, especially with regards to Spectrum's brand.
My favorite part of my current role right now is that I'm the frontline employee. I'm where all the action happens. I'm the first representation that the customer experiences when they call Spectrum. Here, I get to set the tone, the expectation, and follow through with a resolution. And sometimes it doesn't hurt to be the best part of someone's day. My favorite part of my current...
Thanks, Ali Khan. So, Edward was actually one of our first videos, and he's just phenomenal and just got tons of great energy. But as you're listening to the video, what's really important and what makes it authentic and believable is you hear in the background the call center that's going on, but you also see the expertise he's delivering in his role as a customer service person. And so that value that you can bring to the marketplace is so much better than if we did a corporate video ourselves. And so what we've been able to see with all of these videos is the engagement is higher. We see people spend more time, and I know Ali Khan's going to show the performance of one of our professionally done videos as well as what we've done with Edward. So I'll pause for a second and we can spend a little bit of time here.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a really interesting case study that we came across when we were launching with some of our clients like Spectrum, where historically companies are really distributing content that they're producing in-house in a professional capacity on social media sites like LinkedIn as well. And actually what we're seeing is a significant outperformance in user-generated content, right? And that's important in two ways, right? The first way is that it takes significantly less time to create from a content perspective, right? I think everybody on the call today has probably had some scope with professional video, and historically speaking, you have to bring a production team onto site, you have to storyboard and script, and have multiple layers of approval up until you actually distribute that asset, right, over the course of months. It also is a big capital investment as well. And so what we've seen with user-generated content is that it not only outperforms, but it, from a viewership perspective, it also outperforms from a time standpoint and a capital standpoint, which has been really helpful, especially for large enterprise companies to scale the efforts and really maintain more diverse perspectives from their employees.
And one thing we don't have in the slide deck today that you can't really appreciate, but it's probably one of my favorite things about Altru, it's probably the easiest tool we've launched, hands down, bar none, that I've launched in my career. And so from an ease of use perspective, if we have someone that did leave the organization, if Edward left, hopefully he doesn't, we can literally delete that with a dashboard behind the scenes. And we can push out questions actually out into the business to have them answer. And so having that type of seamless platform is really valuable for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And even to that point here, even just to show you guys very quickly, just from an ease of use standpoint, what we try to do from an employee perspective is we try to give them overlay templates so they know exactly where to position themselves and guide them into the right talk track with different instructions and administrative capabilities too. So kind of speaking to Jen's point there.
Thank you.
Awesome. And then kind of moving along here, really what we felt was it was really important to have different products that were serviced around different parts of the funnel that candidates might be experiencing. And so from this, if you think about interacting or engaging with a company like Spectrum on social, right? Well, then what would happen is you would be taken to the career site. And so even within the career site, what we've done with the Spectrum team, even on the homepage, is we've created these customized modules that allow for candidates to really learn about different elements of the company. And Jen, you want to speak to a little bit on how these were formed or why these topics were chosen?
Sure. So we obviously took a lot of what our hiring is. So for most of the MSOs on the call, we've got our call center, our technicians, and our sales roles are 80% of our hiring. But equally as important is our television, news, and media segment, as well as our corporate functions, and also our early career talent is extremely important. And for most of the people on the call, we operate in a decentralized fashion. So we work with each of the 8 recruiting leaders that are part of our recruitment council to identify someone within their business unit to be a content manager for their teams. And so the business units will create the videos. they'll approve the videos, then it comes to our team to run through the corporate review before they're published out into the ecosphere. And I know initially we even had some business units that were a little skeptical, where we already had professional videos done. We incorporated that into the module so that they could still be part of this launch. But over time, we've been able to get more people on and be able to feature all of the different facets within the organization. I think my favorite thing about this tool is you're going to get to hear stories from employees that you would never have heard just because you asked. And you can tag these videos, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, with whatever tags you want, which allows then that to interact with the career site. So as a job seeker is searching the site, the content that's relevant to them pops up.
Love it. Awesome. And so, yeah, that was kind of the second layer of ensuring we could build awareness from a career site perspective. And then as the candidate learns more about the company itself, eventually they'll be led and driven into the job description. And so what Spectrum did is they actually completely revamped their the design aesthetic of their job descriptions. And within the job descriptions, we've also embedded Altru videos and user-generated videos in the job descriptions themselves. So again, the candidate can continue to engage with the employees. And the big benefit here is that because of the tagging infrastructure that Jen alluded to, we've been able to map videos to specific job descriptions. So if it's a sales video, it goes into a sales job description. If it's an engineering video, it goes to an engineering job description.
Yeah, and just to add to this, we've had, this is what's called an advanced job description. Our first round of the advanced job descriptions launched 2.5 years ago. And in those video portions, we actually had those highly professionalized day in the life videos. The advanced job description just by itself, which is more of a visual representation of what a job is, already provided like a 14% lift on click-through rates to apply. And so we've recently launched this module, and we're looking forward to seeing higher level click-through rates again with this new iteration of these advanced job descriptions. And we're still not done. We actually have a new framework that's going to be launched later this year with our new branding that will still embed this as a feature. But certainly the one thing you always want to make sure is you're driving those applicants through that entire process and you don't lose people along the way.
Awesome. Love it. And with that, we could turn it back to Modern Hire.
Thanks, Ali Khan. Really cool stuff. Just a brief overview of Modern Hire, and Jen actually alluded to, we're actually the combination of an assessment firm, Shaker International, and a interview technology firm, Montage, and we rebranded as Modern Hire. But what's really cool about that is we are able to combine and harness the power of both of those assessments, interview tech, advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, all to create a really personalized brand experience. Work with obviously Charter and lots of great brands around the world, 47 of the Fortune 100, and we see lots of candidates knocking on our door each and every day, each and every year. Last year, 20 million, and this year we're trending to go much higher than that in this environment. So you can go to the next slide. So this idea of virtual recruitment and how it plays out, and it plays out in a very similar fashion for Spectrum. This is a hypothetical workflow that is used for a more entry-level type job where we're leveraging technology to take candidates through a journey. Starting on the far left, we talked about how Gen Zers like to be engaged via text. So it starts with a text and really just, do you even have the minimum qualifications of the job? Just some basic screening questions using chatbots. If they meet those requirements, they automatically are transitioned into an assessment. And in the assessment, we'll talk a bit more about this in a bit, but the assessment gives them a preview of what the job's like, but also gives Spectrum back data on fit for that job. If candidate's good fit, could move into an on-demand interview that candidates complete at their own convenience. That interview would then be evaluated by a recruiter or a hiring manager, and if the person was deemed a good fit, then use our auto scheduler for the person to schedule in for a live technology-enabled interview. So really using technology to make it a seamless candidate experience, but also low touch, physical touch throughout the process. The only real touch coming in where you're evaluating a video interview and then conducting that live interview, but moving the candidate through and only getting the most qualified candidates to that back end of the process. And we'll dive into that in more detail here as I break out each of these subsets steps. So this is a glance at how Charter is using interview tech. And you can see it's just been about a year of this journey and very little adoption back in April of 2019. And you can just see the massive growth really spiking in January of 20. And those different colors are different types of technology, where the green is auto scheduling, gray is phone screen, and orange is an on-demand text. And you can see that this has really grown over time. Now, in the bubble there called out to the left, you might say, well, they've started to come down. Well, the reality is with COVID-19, some jobs have been put on hold and number of requisitions has dropped by a full 20%, but the demand and use of the interview is still very high. One other call out, the yellow bar you can see that was very small across 2019 started to grow in 20. Then you see in March widened, that's live interview. So that's kind of the most logical. We used to do face-to-face interviews. We can't do that anymore. And the best like for like trade out there is a live interview. And Jen, I don't know if you want to say anything about what we see here because it is your data.
Yeah, no. It's just been a fantastic growth and partnership. We started actually with we always had Montage in the platform embedded with BrassRing, which obviously always helps when you have an integration already in place. But the growth of this really hit last year when we focused in on trying to make sure that we could get adoption across the organization. Our sales and marketing organization, which hires about 50% of our hires annually, always tends to be the leader in terms of launching our new products. But where we saw the biggest growth in the last year was the on-demand video, the scheduling tool, which is fantastic. We'll talk about that a little bit more, and also on the live video. So all good stuff.
Thanks. And speaking of live interview, just a little bit more here. I mean, just like it sounds, it is using technology to enable a phone interview, a live interview, but there's some pretty cool features here. So yes, it can be one-on-one, but it can be a panel interview, it can be a group interview. You can load interview guides, so everybody's using the same questions. And then there's some cool collaboration features. So it just doesn't have to be talking. You can do share screen if you wanted a candidate to give some kind of presentation, or have a whiteboard for collaboration. Or chat. And then you can also record it so you don't have to worry about taking notes, and you can go back and evaluate it later. So that's live interview, and you can see Charter Spectrum increased 80% from Q4 2019 to Q1 2020, in large part with needing to conduct more live interviews with no longer being able to do them face to face.
Yeah, and Mike, I would add to this, I've actually hired 3 people since COVID started. And I've used live video for every one of my interviews, and it's such a seamless execution, and it's such a much better way for us to conduct these interviews. The other thing I think that people appreciate the most when we're doing panel videos is the opportunity for everyone to hear the same answer from the candidate instead of a candidate going behind the closed doors. It's so much more valuable for everybody to hear the same content from the candidate.
Yeah, and those are great points, and raises something that, is this just a temporary replacement for face-to-face interviews? In some cases it will be, but in a lot of cases, once you kind of start to use this and rely on it and rely on some of the features, and candidates get more accustomed to doing it this way, many aren't going to go back. It's just so much easier to do a live interview than to fly somebody in or have somebody travel to your site to do a live face-to-face interview. So on the next slide, different type of interview, on demand, or you may hear it referred to as asynchronous. And this is, rather than a live, a candidate is invited to do the interview on their own schedule, sent a link, and that video can be delivered in lots of different ways. That interview can be a video, it can be audio, it can be text, and the way that candidates respond, there's also flexibility there as well. They can reply via via video, via just audio, text-based responses where they actually type in their responses. You can do multiple choice, fill in the blank, all kinds of different ways of gathering data. Then after the candidate completes, it goes to the hiring manager or recruiter to evaluate that video. And the nice thing there is you can add some structure and rigor to that by having a scoring rubric. So you have that video or audio file, whatever it may be. And if you're interviewing on, let's say, a competency customer service, you can have a scoring rubric, or what we call a behaviorally anchored rating scale, that defines what good looks like. So what does a good customer service response sound like? So that all people evaluating that interview question are kind of shooting at the same target. So that's sort of the data collection aspect of it, and also the being able to rate it. But there's some other things that you can do to engage candidates as well when you invite them to an on-demand video. So you have an opportunity to share something about your organization in a video, or a realistic job preview, or have a hiring manager do an introduction. And on the next slide, Jen will take it, where an actual use case of where we have a hiring manager giving an introduction to a video-based on-demand interview.
So we'll play this, and it'll do its own testimony, but essentially one of the use cases we didn't expect was, this is Danny Bowman, who's our Chief Mobile Officer. So think about this, we're hiring people for mobile positions. So why wouldn't we want them to use their phone to do an interview? Because this is the product that they're going to be selling and launching. So it was a fantastic way to introduce this amazing position. And what also was great about it is, you know, we had 100% completion rate with our candidates because they saw the engagement with the hiring manager. So this has been probably one of the most interesting ways for us to use video. The thing I do love about on-demand, while I do love live, on-demand allows a person to do it whenever it's convenient for them. And that's really, really helpful, especially if you're home and you've got kids and you're trying to do school and you're trying to do work. If you could wait till like they're all asleep and you can actually think about what you want to say, it's really, really useful, especially in today's time, to allow this to be the case. It also reduces, as Mike alluded, for the candidate expenses. And I think the other thing that is also interesting is when I asked my recruitment counsel that very question about, what do you think happens after COVID? Do we go back to having all on-site? And their answer was, I think that the finalist comes on-site because the experience of seeing the environment is really important. And while you can do virtual introductions to an environment, it is still valuable. So they think that what will happen is that finalist comes on site and we'll get more value out of getting to a finalist before making that travel arrangement. So we'll go ahead and play this.
Hi, this is Danny Bowman with Charter Communications. I'm the Chief Mobile Officer, and I have been in the mobile industry for literally 3 decades, and it has been an incredible journey. And I've now been here at Charter for 6 months, and we actually launched our mobile business 90 days ago. We have set a tremendous foundation for growth. And now our next step is to find some great talent who's got tons of experience, especially in the mobile industry. So why do I think we will be successful? Charter has...
So, yeah, thanks
so much.
Yeah. Okay, so and Jen referenced this a bit, but interview scheduling is another important tool. If you think about interviews, they are kind of high touch, can be labor intensive, but one of the hidden costs that we don't think about, or we probably don't as often think about, is all of the time that goes into scheduling, coordinating schedules with the candidates, with hiring managers, panel interviews, group interviews. And what interviewing scheduling does is allow candidates to self-schedule. It syncs with Outlook, so you can go in, set the times that you're available to interview, and then candidates can pick those times. All of the communications are handled by the platform. Meeting requests are sent, follow-up communications, so it makes it extremely easy and takes the lifting out of scheduling. And you remember the spectrum graph on technology adoption, they were just ramping up in 19. And even so, 3,225 hours saved for scheduling. And I checked, it's 2,080 hours in a work year. So this is like almost 1 3/4 FTE saved just doing an administrative task of trying to schedule interviews. And I'm guessing 2020's data is going to be much more than this, given how much they're leveraging the interview scheduling.
Yep.
Okay, last kind of tool set that I'll talk about is the virtual job tryout assessment. And many of you on this session are probably familiar with pre-employment assessment. Virtual job tryout assessment's a little bit different in that it's more balanced and two-way information exchange. So there's something in it for the candidate. The candidate goes through a day in the life. They learn about some of the challenges and demands of the job, actually get put into the role. So they walk away feeling more informed about the job to make a decision. At the same time, Spectrum's getting great data back to prioritize candidates based on those that have the highest propensity to succeed. And to take a look at an example of one of these for one of the high volume jobs on the next slide. This is for field technicians, which many of you on the call might have field technicians as well. This is what that virtual job tryout looks like from beginning to end. Kind of the journey that candidates go through. On the far left begins with a brief virtual job tryout, a little bit about these are some of the things that people find rewarding, some of the challenges of the job. From there, the candidate goes into some simulated customer interactions. A really important part of the job is that customer service orientation. And so these are actually vignettes that put the candidate into those customer service scenarios. From there, third from the left is a troubleshooting exercise. Obviously, field techs need to be able to troubleshoot. And this is a kind of a fictitious system that we've designed with a rule base, and the task is to navigate your way through and figure out which component part isn't operating appropriately, just like technicians do on the job. From there, in the middle there's a kind of a math exercise. They need to be able to do quick calculations. This isn't an SAT type GRE math, but really set in the world of this job in doing calculations on feet of cable and degradation of signal and those types of things that they would actually do on the job. And then the last two exercises are a work history, getting at reliability, stability, relevant job relevant experiences, and then on the far right there, behavioral styles. So this is the kind of the seamless candidate experience. We just took screen grabs of each of the main sections that candidates journey through. On the next slide, we see some of the virtual job tryouts at a glance for the high volume jobs at Spectrum, including field technician, but also the customer ops or contact center roles, retail roles, sales roles, as well as warehouse technicians. And you can see that these just launched, it's not even been a year yet, which is hard to believe, but we're coming up on a year, and you can see the volume and how many candidates have gone through. But really impressive here, and this is one of Jen's favorite slides, is that completion rate, because she and Spectrum suffered through a previous assessment where completion rates were only at 50%. So 50% of candidates falling out of the process at this point during the assessment. By making it mobile enabled, in making it engaging two-way information exchange where candidates actually get something out of it, you can see those completion rates. Many of them are butting up against 90%. And then below that, in the last row of the table, you can see how many are going through the assessment on a smartphone. 50% at least for all the jobs, and retail sales and sales representative coming close to 60%. So if you don't have a mobile enabled process, that's where you're starting to get this fallout of nearly 50% of candidates. And then, so how we use this data, how Spectrum uses the data, and getting back to this environment of candidate abundance that we're in, and being overwhelmed with candidates, and how do we spend our time with the right candidates? This is the answer. This is how they do it. Is Spectrum constantly works with us to calibrate the assessments against outcomes, turnover, metrics, and that's what we're seeing an example here from a recent study we did with them that shows that those that perform poorly on the assessment there on the red line on the left are turning over at a higher rate. On the right, you're seeing that they're also the poorest performers, and the greens are the best performers, and they're also staying at a higher rate. So how that translates into decision support into this virtual recruitment process is it allows Jen's team to really home in on those candidates who are the best fit and spend time with them, where they don't necessarily have to spend time with candidates that clearly aren't a fit for the job. And if you start to run the numbers here, so yes, it helps with quality. So you're fishing from a better pool, a higher propensity to stay, a higher propensity to perform. So it has that quality impact. But from an efficiency standpoint, bottom 30%. In the contact center, 140,000 candidates so far. You take 30% of those, that's over 40,000 candidates. If without this, you would have had to touch each one of those candidates. And let's just say it's a 5-minute resume screen or application, 5 minutes per candidate. That translates into 3,500 hours. Again, it's almost 2 FTEs who would have spent time just quickly processing candidates who clearly aren't a good fit for the job. So there's a great efficiency lift by using tools like this as well. Earlier, I showed interview usage. This is a snapshot of assessment usage through COVID, where we saw, you can see spikes in mid-March, where we're seeing about 140,000 assessments a day, and that's a little misleading in that we have some really big clients who were well publicized in the news in making 50,000 hires, 100,000 hires, and taking some of those furloughed employees or those that have been laid off and hiring them. So those were those initial job fairs where they were bringing them on board. But that you can see that the assessments continue to be at above baseline, and that's being offset. That's true even though some of our clients have stopped hiring altogether. We have retail clients that have shut their stores, so they're not doing any hiring at all. So similar to Spectrum having 20% fewer requisitions, we've seen a similar thing in our client base, many of which who have stopped hiring altogether. But again, reinforcing this abundance, those that continue to hire are seeing a spike, an increase in candidate volume, and are using tools like this to really identify the ones that are the best fit. Okay, so that kind of takes us through current state and some of the great tools that Spectrum's using today. And in this next phase, as Jen teed up, I want to talk a little bit about what's coming. And I'll talk about a couple things, and then I'll turn it back over to Ali Khan, who will talk about one as well. One is, if you think about interviewing and video interview and on demand, one of the challenges with it and its scalability is, if I have 10 interviews, 20, 50 videos to review as a hiring manager or recruiter, that can still become a huge bottleneck. So what we have implemented and will be rolling out over the coming months is automated scoring of those interviews using artificial intelligence, natural language processing. We're not evaluating facial features or the audio, but rather the content of what the candidate is saying. The same way that you evaluate interviews today. So what is being said, either in a video or audio, is being automatically transcribed into text, and then we're evaluating that text against the competencies required for the job. So that's a way to kind of tier candidates. Again, if we have 50, to tier candidates into who are the best fit based on the interview. And one more that I'll mention on the next slide that we're getting ready to do a beta test with Spectrum is recommending jobs to candidates. So you think of all these candidates that are coming to your career site, and Spectrum has lots of different jobs, and it's hard for candidates to know which jobs they might be cut out for, which ones might be interesting to them. So what this does is kind of a quick 10-minute, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to tell you a little bit about yourself, your style, and actually give you a prioritized list of jobs based on your interests that Spectrum has to offer. And then you can click in there and go see and learn more about those jobs. So it's really there for candidates playing traffic cop to help them find jobs that match their interests.
Awesome, thanks, Mike. That was great, super helpful. One element that we're working on as a next step with the Spectrum team is, we receive feedback from our clients that said, look, we don't just interact with our candidates via the career site, through the job descriptions and social media, but we also interact with them through email as well. So actually what we built, what we started out by doing was we built a plugin within both Outlook and Gmail. So right within Outlook and Gmail, what you're able to do is launch the Alltrue platform, where your recruiters, hiring managers, whoever has access to this can actually source through videos that have been approved for distribution. And we could actually embed those right into email communications with candidates. So that was kind of step one. And actually, Jen, you want to speak to kind of the CRM that you guys are using and how we're going to be integrating with that?
Yeah, so we actually just launched Smashfly today, re-rolled it out to the organization. It was rolled out to a portion of the organization previously, but now we'll be able to use this to reach out to our candidates. We expect to be able to use this specifically in our military, our early career communications, and then also even to some of our high volume where it makes sense, to make sure that we're giving that nurture approach to bringing candidates along a journey with us. And so, you know, hopefully with all the different tools you've seen today is that although it's high technology, we haven't lost the touch and we haven't lost that human element that we have within all of the tools that we have. And I think we have one more slide, which is our key takeaways. But while we're pulling that up, if there's questions that people want to bring into us to ask, we have about 15 minutes left. I just thought that it was really important to make sure you had 3 takeaways from us. So one of the first things that we want to talk about is making sure that right now, in this moment in time, you should be shifting your messaging and tonality into the marketplace to figure out how you can help people. So you've already seen that in abundance from many, many, many companies, but you know it's really important right now. The second thing is that now that we're in this abundant marketplace, it's really important to be able to rely on the tools we put in place with Modern Hire that are scientific, that allow us to identify top talent. And you know, the one that Mike just mentioned probably will come in super handy with the abundance piece. And certainly, last but not least, it's, you know, you always want to make sure you're working on your platform and your ecosystem, and setting up these virtual tools was critical no matter what kind of market you're in. Because if it's in the market of scarcity, it allows you to be a differentiated product in the marketplace to make sure that your organization is a destination for talent. And so with that, it looks like we at least got one question or a comment, at least in the chat. So I'll pause for a second to see if there's any questions from Colleen or Parthavi that can share with us. And let me see, I might be able to even pull this up. Okay, let's see here. So I see Tina Topping loves Altru. Ali Khan, do you want to share how they might be able to get in contact with you or your team?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, here, I will just put my email right into the chat, and feel free to reach out. Would love to hear your feedback on what we're building and kind of what you guys are up to as well.
Sure. So any other questions? Got a couple of thanks. Wonderful. Thank you, Chelsea. Okay. Well, we super appreciate the opportunity to share some of the work that we've been able to do. And thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Tina. Really appreciate all the comments here. We love what we do, and hopefully that showed today. And certainly it's always great to be able to share the different partnerships that we have and what we're doing at Spectrum. And I'm not
Thanks,
sure.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.